The last recap for our ongoing Edge of the Empire campaign, The Seeds of Reckoning, for Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars role-playing, was a long time ago. That was recap number 14. It was released on May 20th of 2017. It's now November 19th of the same year on time of recording, and this will very likely be the last of the recaps of that campaign. The campaign's not exactly over, but for all intents and purposes, it has come to an end. The campaign as a unified group of characters operating in that galaxy far, far away, that period is pretty much over. At the end of recap number 14, we were saying goodbye to the player of Captain Paul Hyland, who was leaving Korea, and we were about to get indications that the players of T3 and Moss were going to have their second child, and of course that is going to put tremendous strain on their time, while of course doubling up on their happiness and household blessings and all of that stuff. Which leaves the player of Henry and myself being the only ones regularly available. Except, of course, there are incredible constraints on my time as well. So, to be fair to the campaign, we needed to find some kind of ending point, but not really end the campaign, as we're all quite attached to these characters and the threads of story that they were creating and pursuing. But to set it up so that even though the crew was separating, their individual stories could be followed. So it may be that in the future we find stories appearing about Henry Forsate and his apprentice Tyra. It may be that Moss the Explorer, some of his great discoveries on these abandoned worlds out in wild space, well, they may become the focal point of some adventures. And who knows what kind of crazy hijinks T3 will get up to, seeing as how it was pretty much that droid which is almost single-handedly responsible for freeing the crew from almost every terrible situation that the crew got itself into. Without T3, it's very likely the campaign would have ended much, much earlier. And everybody on the crew knows that. And of course, most of them will only admit this because now that she's become willing to commit assassination in public, they're not really sure if they can trust her anymore. And that's the other big part of what is causing this campaign to transition from what it was to what it will be. The characters have grown. The characters have changed a lot over 3 years. Moss, who is kind of following a mystery as well as developing a family, is now kind of at odds. The family isn't quite what it used to be, and it might be time for him to strike out and be a leader in his own right. Henry needs to become a teacher, but he also needs to become a student. He needs to get his head straight about the Force and figure out exactly what it's been trying to tell him all of this time. This is very much a solo journey for that character and characters that might band around him. T3, likewise, is living in a galaxy that's not exactly friendly to droid life like she represents. And she still has quite a number of vendettas to pay off. The Maker is still alive, should he be. And it may be possible for her to, piece by piece, reassemble the members of her production line, things that she considers to be family. Will this happen? Is there any room in this story for the organic crew which has sheltered her from the storm of how the galaxy is toward artificial life? So, the seeds of reckoning have been planted. Now it's time for all these individual stories to bear fruit. Maybe they'll intertwine like vines, and maybe they'll blossom separately. And when and if they do happen, I'll share them with you. But until then, what are we going to be doing? Well, we couldn't quite bear to say farewell to science fiction, it turns out. And so we'll be staying with science fiction, and we'll be staying with a system designed by the same designer as did Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars. We're going to be looking at an iteration of the 2D20 system, this time for Star Trek Adventures. We're playing in the Next Generation era, and I was outvoted. So we're playing in the Next Generation era and seeing where this game takes us. We're going to play it as written and as it develops, and as we discover who these characters are and what the campaign is about, I'll start sharing recaps like we did for Edge of the Empires, The Seeds of Reckoning. So we leave the campaign and we leave this last recap, number 15, with all of the characters who are not Captain Paul Hyland on Haven and in situations where they can then go out into that great galaxy and create a new destiny for themselves. And that's fitting, I think.